Welcome back to Empowerment Radio. The 10 terrains, a map to your consciousness, to your life, where you're heading towards. It's really fascinating stuff Alan and Tahnee have really brought together. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I have to ask you later how you even came up with that. But right now, the question that comes to mind is, so I work, as I said, with people with lots of fears and anxiety, survival patterns. Now, I would say they come from all different kinds of levels of consciousness. This is not all, well, they are squares or whatever. I mean, I don't like, anyhow, putting people in these boxes, but their consciousness is certainly in a consciousness often is very advanced in their spiritual beliefs. And you could say maybe they're spirals or torrids or whatever, but they are then really grappling with anxiety in regards to survival, in regards to, feeling that people may reject them, criticize them, that they are, there is this old past life fear of getting burned at the stake. And is that possible that we go still back and forth and skipping several terrains in our desire to survive, to make it here?
No, we really only are at any one moment held in one place, and this again is the sum total of our field. This is in the sense of quantum physics, this is just your bundle of charge which is holding you there. But you can be put into fear, but it's how you're responding to that fear or reacting to that fear that's going to determine if that's the difference at each terrain. Your reaction or response is going to be completely different. In one set of terrains, you're going to be feeling very helpless, and you're going to not really know how to manage it, and you're going to feel very lost and really looking outside of yourself for some support. At other terrains, you're very conscious of the fear and you're really looking at it, but you're taking it on. You're not running from it. You're actually embracing it and looking to see, what is this trying to tell me? What am I needing to learn here? What is the lesson underneath this? And so it's a bigger, it's a different relationship to the idea of fear. And even though you're held in one place, you can have lagging behaviors that may come from previous terrains, conditioning that's coming from your genetic lines or from the culture. And you may also become aware of certain things and sort of see yourself being more expanded than you actually truly are. You could have a certain experience that could have opened you up, meditation experience or ayahuasca journey or something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that now you're enlightened, because you've still got to work with this charge that you're holding in your field. And that will really show itself in moments of crisis. That's when your terrain really shows up. I mean, when things are calm and easy, people can look to be all over the place and you wouldn't really know. But when things are really tense and they're in crisis, that's when you see how people react in that moment, if they're going to be centered or if they're just going to fall apart.
And I'd also say that if you think of this universe as a school, what is the greatest teacher in this school? It is fear. And there are a lot of forces at play in our world to instill fear into us from birth. There's a lot of structures that are broken down in our society, which can cause children to have very unloving childhoods, where they've got attachment wounding and all sorts of things that are creating anxieties. And everybody's got that. Everybody's got that in their childhood. Most people have that to some degree. We're living in an isolated culture, it's a disconnected culture. So it doesn't matter what terrain you're at. You have that in your childhood, you've had that in your conditioning, and you've had that in the collective field. So the issue is, how do you deal with that? And what I've observed is that the people at the less expanded terrains, and there's no judgment in this, that's just where they're at, tend to not really do the deep investigative work to get to the bottom of their fears. They just tend to act from their fears. So they're in reaction, they're lashing out, they're blaming other people, they're acting out those fears. Where someone, say at spiral or toroid, or even circle, or even some people at diamond, they're more likely to be sitting with those fears. So let's take someone at circle, they're sitting with those fears. How does this feel in my body, this fear? Why is this coming up? They're looking inwards. They may hire someone to help them with that, but it's still a self-reflective process. At spiral or toroid, someone will be looking at, where is this coming from in my past lives or in my genetic line, or in my childhood, and how can I clear that from my field so I can come back to center? So they're much more aware of this conditioning and this patterning and this triggering that's happening, and they're highly self-responsible in dealing with it. Everybody's grappling with the same stuff. It's just how we're grappling with it. You can't come through this school with the kind of childhoods we're having in the society we've got and not get messed up to some degree. But it's the way in which we're holding that, like the way that we're working with that, the way that we're owning that and we're embodying that changes at each terrain. And you can see it really, really distinctly. And we've seen it play out very clearly in this coronavirus crisis, because that's been a very fear-inducing situation. And we did a series of videos on our YouTube channel about how people at each terrain are dealing with that so differently, even though they're all dealing with fears.
Yeah, that would be a really good place for your audience to go to look at the the individual terrains in reaction to COVID, because that's really being put in our face as a fear.
Right. Now, I agree with what you're saying. What I noticed is that this conditioning and this childhood baggage that is deep buried in the subconscious mind. In my work, I can often see the conflict. We are on a conscious level, in a very different place, and we know we can introspect and we can draw on our inner resources. And then on a subconscious level, we go into, how can I get away from this, or how can I control, or how can I lash out, or please. So this is the book I'm just finishing about these survival patterns. And it's really interesting because the book may be something about the terrains as well, where you go back to finding yourself through the bridge of fear and anxiety. It basically helps you to get out of survival into this most authentic self, the connection to your deepest self. At what terrain would you say you reach that point where you really feel like you're connected to your truest form, that maybe the form that even was there before you were born?
I would say you're probably spiral, or
spiral's where it starts.
The connection-based terrain moving to spiral is where a lot of people are really starting this journey, and beyond spiral to the fractal-based terrain and unity-based terrain, it's deepening and expanding, because these first 6 terrains, the particle terrain through to circle, they're really what we call single terrains. They only really can see themselves, whereas at spiral, toroid, infinity, and nothing we don't really talk about because it's so expanded, but at those terrains, they're multi-dimensional terrains. So you're able to see where you're at in relation to all of these other terrains. So it's a much bigger perspective, so that you have a different relationship to the
when
question.
Someone shifts into spiral, the thing that changes from the previous terrain, circle, the connection-based terrain, at circle you have a very deep connection to your body, your heart, the earth, the web of life, all creatures born and unborn, future generations. And that's a very deep thing. But at spiral, the shift that happens is someone starts to feel a very visceral connection to the infinite, to the cosmic tapestry. And at that point, they can start to feel themselves beyond this life, beyond this small being that they actually are. And so when you ask a question, when does someone start to come more into their infinite self? It's really at spiral that people start to bring their infinite self through into this vehicle more and more. And they're working on that. And that's a practice they're doing. And that just deepens and deepens at toroid and infinity. And infinity is the point where everything is one anyway, so it kind of becomes irrelevant.
Right.
So where that journey is sort of the spiral toroid journey, I would say.
Now, you said we don't talk about the last one, but we have to. Now you brought it up. So what is the last one?
Well, we've got these 2 bookends here. The matter-based terrain particle, which is this one here at this end of the continuum, and then the void-based terrain nothing, which is here at the other end. There's so few people. At the matter-based terrain, you're really looking at people that are like maybe born in a trash dump. A few, very small percentages.
It's like caveman.
Caveman. They have just no. They're just in survival, just pure survival, almost animal survival. So there's no culture, there's no meaning, there's really nothing. At the other extreme, you've got such a conscious awareness that you're beyond space and time, and anything that involves that. So you're dealing with someone that's so expanded, they can really be moving in and out of matter. They can move in and out of existence. They can just be wherever, whenever. So they're, very, very advanced. Very, very few percentages of people they're there, but there are beings around.
I don't personally.
I don't know any personally, but I, you know,
I read about
I know
ascended masters.
some people that are in the journey from
Mm.
infinity to no thing, but I've not yet met anybody that's actually gone and sits in the void, and then they actually, or, you know, but I know of beings that are, you know, tens of thousands of years old, and you know, we read about them in the lore, and they're there, they're around.
People talk about ascended masters and beings like that that don't need to be in the form of a body. You know, they've shifted past the point where they are trapped in beliefs about oxygen and food and we need to breathe. Like they're past that in their journey.
Right.
So they can just, that's so when you think of what people call ascended masters, they're describing someone at that
So we're really just kind of framing
But you're not going to
the
meet
totality of the human experience between these terrains, which, you know, they're valid too.
They're the bookends that give context to the matter and the void. Without the matter and the void, you can't have the other 8 terrains in the middle, which is where everyone's playing. That's a playing field, really.
Now, how would you say people are getting along that are in different terrains, especially if they are married? Are there ways for them to, you know, just learn to understand each other better or help each other to move through their differences? I mean, what suggestions do you have? Where are the biggest clashes, and where?
Absolutely. Do the quiz and get your report. And if you're in a relationship, both of you do the quiz and get your reports, because each of these terrains, the one thing that's fascinating to learn about them is that their own universe, but in that universe, they have their own memetics, they have their own language, their own keywords. And that's how we've been able to really clue in where someone's at, is basically how they're seeing the world, the words they use and the memes they're using. So if you've got a relationship going on where you're in one terrain and your partner's in the other terrain, by knowing what they need to feel safe, by knowing how they're viewing the world, by knowing what words they respond to and the memes they respond to, you can actually start to speak to them in a language that they feel safe and heard and gotten. And so you're going to create a bridge, a much stronger bridge, because you're meeting them where they're at. And if you're more expanded, you're probably more likely to be able to meet someone that is in a more contracted terrain than you, versus say someone that's maybe at square and there was someone that's at spiral. They're not going to really be able to stretch and understand that person. They're going to seem like a very foreign being to them. Right. Someone at spiral, they all of these previous terrains are like, think of it like Russian dolls. If you're at spiral, you've got an awareness of all these other terrains within you, so you can look back, but looking forward, it's sort of like, well, I have an idea of that, but you really don't have a relation to it yet.
And the thing is, often a lot of the conflict that happens between two people, whether it's husband and wife or father and son or whatever, is because we want the other person to do what we're doing and to see the world the way we are and to change. And if we've had massive expansion, we want them to also expand. Why are they not growing as fast as I do? But once you understand that everybody's journey is equally valid and every point along this continuum is equally needed and equally important, and it's a massive classroom and a contribution to the world, if you come from that perspective and you find out that your spouse is at a different terrain, it's like, wow, this is where they're at right now. This is the journey they're on. This is what they're learning. I can have some understanding of that, some compassion for that. I can hold space for them. They're learning free will right now, or they're learning, you know, how to be part of the consensus reality, or they're learning to find themselves as a unique person. I've done that, but I can still support them in that process. And so it can really forge a lot of connection between people, to come from a place of supporting and holding space for and having compassion for someone else, rather than trying to get them to change and grow. And so much in our culture is coming from everybody should grow and everybody should expand. Well, not necessarily. Everyone's at the same point. And the thing that's interesting in marriages is often people will be drawn to each other at the same terrain. Let's say they both met at school and they're university and they're at square. And then over the course of the next 2 decades, one of them shifts to diamond, but the other one hasn't. And the other one keeps shifting and they go to circle, and the other one's still at square. This happens in marriages because just because you start at the same point doesn't mean your journeys are going to be the same. So what can seem very terrifying as my partner's changing so much, I don't understand them anymore, can cause so much conflict. When you understand what's happening, you can actually allow them to have their journey, and the people can still stay in a loving relationship, just understanding it, and all the fear of what is going on, why do they want to do that, I don't want to do that, goes away because you understand what it is.
Hi, Dr. Friedemann here. Thank you for tuning into my YouTube channel. If you're interested in learning more about fear and anxiety, Here you'll find guided meditations, webinars, and interviews with some of the most renowned experts in the field of empowerment. Delve into the over 230 videos and more to come every week.